Good evening and welcome to the February 1, 2016 meeting of the BUHS District 6 Board. We have a small regular agenda tonight of items that we'll take care of, but the primary purpose of this meeting is the public hearing on the budget, which will be presented to the annual meeting a week from Tuesday. I get the right date tonight. Yes, it was a Tuesday. And so we will start the meeting with that. What I would like to do for the benefit of people who are not here but would maybe watching on TV, give a brief summary of the expense side of the budget, which is our side, so to speak, that we're responsible for. And welcome. It's good to see members of the public here, and by all means, questions, comments will be welcome as we proceed through this. So, just by way of a general introduction to the budget, and there are plenty of copies of what's called the Big Book, Annual Report 2016, and then there's also a condensed version of that called the Annual Report Summary, amazingly enough. I'm going to generally go through, follow the Big Book, but I will perhaps go from time to time, and hopefully we'll keep the page numbers straight. So, just a little bit of background on the budget. This year was certainly one of the most challenging years to put a budget together, primarily because the target kept moving. As most of you know, I'm sure, or all of you know, Act 46, which was passed and went into law July 1st, required that school boards meet certain budget requirements in order to avoid tax penalties, the allowable growth limit. And that is based on equalized pupils. So what that means is one student doesn't always equal one student, particularly in the case of students that have situations such as English language learners, low in the poverty range, and so there's all different numbers, and the state comes up with a formula. And that formula, number of equalized students, is not generally available until well into the process. But this year, the case is that your measurement versus the allowable growth limit is based entirely on the equalized pupil number. So what we did right from the get-go was focus on what we could control, and that is the expense side of the budget, and not try to manage this to what we surmised might happen with equalized students or anything else that came down with Act 46 and so forth. For the 9th year in a row, we asked administrators back in late October, early November. Our direction as a board was to maintain level service, and this year to maintain as close as possible level expenses. Now, given the fact that we have previously negotiated salary increases of about 2.5%, we had just under 8% increase in health insurance. That presents a challenge. That's a big portion of our total right there. So in order to keep the whole situation under control, it creates some extreme challenges. And we've been asking this now. This is I went through and looked at my notes from prior years. This is essentially the 8th year anyway that we've asked that of administrators and staff, and I think they've done a great job of going through every area, every category, line by line, looking for places that we can operate more efficiently, and not places where we can say, well, let's just do away with this particular program, that'll make it easy. In lieu of that, they're moving some human resources and some other resources around and have been able to keep the total number well under control. And that applies to all three units, which the high school, the career center, and BAMS, and as well as what we call the district-wide budget, which is for items that cover the entire three schools: the library, nurses, plan operations, and so forth. And I really think they need to be recognized for a lot of work. And in addition to that, the administrators to my right here, working on behalf of the supervisory union, and particularly Frank, who with the budgets of all the schools he has to deal with, and also all the Act 46 uncertainty, has been stellar. And we're lucky to have these guys helping us along with this process. And I thank the board for their efforts. We've had a lot of meetings, and believe me, it doesn't get any easier, but as the years go by, but I think we came out with something that's really going to work, and work for our students as well. Oliver, I'm sorry I didn't bring your name card out. Oliver Goodman joins. Okay, so basically the bottom line, and I kind of sometimes work backwards from the bottom line. The bottom line of our budget that we will present as the main item on the annual meeting agenda is $27,983,000.
What page, please?
Well, I'm reading that. I wrote it on the cover. But let's go to page 5 because that's got the summary of the various units.
In the yellow.
5 in the yellow, and
30. If you are in the big book, it's page 35.
Yes, 35 in the big book, and that's the number that's right about in the middle of the page, over towards the right, under totals, obviously, $27,983,000, and that represents a 0.3% increase over last year. Again, remember that we had significant increases in terms of human resource salaries, health insurance, and so forth. And in spite of that, we were able to come in with only a 0.3% Yeah, not 3%, 0.3%. Now, what that translates to in the equalized student area is $17,349 per equalized pupil in expenditures, and that is $5 below the threshold that would put us into a penalty. So it's close, but and very close when you translate that into dollars. It isn't very many dollars on a $28 million budget, but that keeps us below the penalty for, as it stands right now anyway, and they have, the legislature has, I believe, come to an agreement finally of what will happen for this year, so it looks like we're still under that. So I'd like to take you down briefly through the various main sectors of this budget, and again on page 5 or 35, depending on which book you're in. Starting at the top, and you can see we have the 2014-15 budget actual, the 2015-16, which is the budget that we're in right now, and the proposed, which is the third column from the right, is the proposed budget for next year. So you can kind of see the relationship as time has moved along. District-wide budget, again, is such things as the plant maintenance, which is a big part of it. That's this giant facility, and all everything from heating oil to custodians to all the services that go along with it, and other programs that are spread across all 3 units. And the district-wide is up 3.4%, but most of that is related to special ed expense, and the balance of the expenses in district-wide are held level or decreased, including maintenance. And lest you be concerned that we're cutting corners on maintenance, We aren't. We've got the work in there that needs to be done to keep this facility going. The reason we had to spend $55 million a few years ago partly was that deferred maintenance, that things hadn't been done. We're trying to do things as we go along and keep the maintenance up. So there's adequate funds in there for that. Maybe I would ask Frank to just point out why that particular, the special ed, has an impact on the district-wide budget in going up 300 and some thousand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what that represents is primarily the assessment that comes through the supervisory union. And as you probably recall, a couple of years ago, the legislature asked that all special ed programming get essentially the employment set up through the supervisory union, primarily so that staff can be assigned to where the student need is, gives the single employer the ability to meet student need in a more efficient way. But what we've seen is an increase in some of our high needs student costs that are a significant part of the increase that Bob is referred to on that 379,000. There's also been a shift in some of the employment from the high school to the supervisory union. That again accounts for an increase in the assessment. It's always important to note when we see an increase in special education spending that there's a correlated increase in the reimbursement from the state. So if you were looking at your big book, the page 38 is a listing of the special ed revenue. It's all revenue on page 38 of the main book, and kind of if you scan that whole page in terms of the dollar difference, so that's the second column from the right there, dollar difference, you'll see the largest increase on that page, 229,000, sort of in the middle, is associated with special ed intensive aid, 229,000. So just making the point that even though we are seeing a fairly significant increase in the spending, we're seeing a substantial relief from the state aid. And Bob referred to the spending per equalized student. That's a very significant number, because spending per equalized student is total spending less this type of revenue that calculates something called net education spending. That's the basis for calculating the cost per student, the equalized cost per student. So it's important to take the two together whenever we're talking about impact on tax rates and the financial resources we have.
Thank you. While we're still on the district-wide, I would just like to draw your attention to page 49 in the big book, and that is the 5-year capital plan. And as you can see, we're talking about FY17, second column from the left. And our capital plans are, for this year, are a total of $187,500. And of that, just below that, you'll see that most of it, $137,000, is going to be part of the within the operating budget. So there are no requests at this meeting for special articles for any capital expenditures. We will utilize $50,000 out of our capital reserve towards that. And we still do have a plan that looks out 5 years. It's only through the 20th on here. We adjust it from year to year, but that helps us look ahead to see what we're going to be faced with in terms of capital expenses. This facility is now 12 years old, parts of it, and it's in great condition, but there's some things we have to start putting some money into, and we know that coming up there will be some expenses. But that's our present version of the capital plan, which fits right into the operations and maintenance part of the district budget. You can also notice on the just below the, going back to the main page that we're on, you can see just below district-wide it says special articles capital, and there's nothing in this proposed budget for that. Again, as I just stated, we won't be asking for any specific capital requests outside the operating budget. You can see where debt service, the first line is the big debt from the bond, and that drops a little bit this year. And then you can also see, of note, factor that helps us out is that the track debt service was completed in this year, so we have no more payment on that. So that gives you a total district-wide budget of expenditures 13,749,756. So, which is up overall 1.7%. So turning to the senior high, here again, careful evaluation of all the programs. Everybody hears about what's going on in the state in that our student count has dropped dramatically over the last few years. And while it has stabilized somewhat here at BUHS, if you go back and take a look at where things were 10 years ago, we are definitely down, and we have to right-size our operation to make it work and keep the programs we want to keep and the services we want to keep, but still do it within a budget based on the number of students that we have. And the high school has done a particularly good job at this over the last few years, is right-sizing for the number of students that we have. In this case, what we call discretionary spending, which is things that are not locked in, like the salaries and health insurance and all that, supplies, equipment, some of the other programs and all the odds and ends, discretionary is up only 1% in the high school. And most of that is related to, it was time to replace a lot of the textbooks in math. So it's not a very big number that it's up. There were some cuts made, and this, as I referred to in the first sentence, is that it was a challenging year, and we did make some cuts in this budget in the high school. And the effort is overall is being made to try to make cuts more in the administrative end of things as opposed to the direct instruction. And that's going to be the case here at the high school. There will be reductions in a couple of the main departments. One teacher will be partially utilized at the Career Center, again sharing resources, human resources between units. The only real increase in the high school is part-time technical support. We have a huge amount of technology. We have the Chromebooks now in 9th and 10th grade, I believe. And with all this technology, it's important to have adequate staffing to work with it and to work with the students and staff and the best utilizing it. There's no sense in investing in a lot of stuff that you don't utilize properly. So we do have a 0.4 increase in tech support. And one other area that's up slightly is our school resource officer, which is contracted with the Windham County Sheriff's Department. And for quite some time, we've had quite a, I guess we'd call it somewhat of a sweetheart deal with them. But now it's time that they need to move that up a little bit. So that's up a little bit. Everything else has been held level or decreased. And as a result, the senior high is actually down 2.2% from last year. You can see at $6,370,000. The next line below that is tuition to Windham Regional Career Center. That's the tuition that BUHS pays for the students that attend classes at the Career Center. And if there's questions on how that's formulated, I believe there's a page in the book that shows that. That one I didn't mark.
Page 47.
Page 47, maybe we'll take just a real quick look at that. And you can see how that vocational tuition is developed. But that's what that number is, and that is down a little bit from last year. So that brings the senior high school to a 1.9% decrease in expense versus last year. Moving on to BAMS, Brattleboro Area Middle School, that budget at 3.326 is up slightly from last year. The census, the student census, I referred to it being starting to level off at the high school. It's been a little bit of an up and down at the middle school with a pretty good sized bump last year, and those are the ones that are now moving into 9th grade, I believe. So the census is going to be down a little bit, but it's kind of back to where it was before we had the little blip. So the way I look at it is we're going to level off, but this was a temporary up and down. There will be some slight modifications of staffing at BAMS in various areas, in most cases partial numbers. Most of these changes that we're doing staff-wise tend to be part of a person where we share, you know, or somebody works somewhat in the senior high and some in the BAMS middle school. There will be a staff reduction, one staff reduction in BAMS for a regular position where it's felt that that topic can be covered adequately with the current staff. Not a lot of other changes at BAMS. The discretionary spending is being held constant, and so as a result, BAMS is up a little bit, 1.9%. Moving on to the Career Center, that budget is $2.481 million, and that is actually down $44,000 or 1.7%. And in the Career Center, we have a lot of programs, and the class size there varies. It needs to vary because of the various topics. You won't have 20 people in a forestry class, for instance. And so it takes pretty good scrutiny of those various programs, and we are continuing to offer all the programs, but we made some partial reductions in staffing in several of them. And basically including a couple of, reducing a couple of paras and switching some responsibility from the administrative to teaching and back and forth. So the Career Center is down for this coming year. Our expected count at the Career Center is going to be about level. We have about 30, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, 57 tuition students. So that's revenue from the outlying towns that are sent to the Career Center. And so that's where that stands, and if you add it all up, you come out with 27,983 for a budget versus 27,908. And what really counts against the penalty is the fact that we are on a equalized student basis just below that penalty. That's kind of the four-part version of it. There's obviously a lot of details in between the lines, but I would like certainly now to talk a little bit, even though as the board we primarily focus on the expense part. I'd like to have Frank just go through the revenue and the tax picture as only he can explain it.
Okay.
One of the probably 3 people in the state that understands it entirely.
It continues to get complex here as we speak. You know, they just added another layer on the complexity. But so page 38 we glanced at about earlier. Pretty straightforward information I can give you a brief overview of. And then page 39 is the tax calculation, the estimated tax calculation that we can also review, and they are connected. So on the revenue picture, it very much mirrors the budget spending amounts. It is, of course, it's the resource, the financial resource that funds the expenditure plan that we just reviewed. The largest number on the page is the state support grant. And that is associated with the difference between the amount that all of the other sources of funds we need to operate all of our various programs, and the amount that we need from the general education fund to operate the district. So let me review how the tax calculation relates to both the revenue and expense. So on page 39, the very top line in that document, this is a document developed by the Agency of Education, and it's a document that's required to be published in our town reports. And it essentially illustrates the calculations for the school tax rate and the public school funding mechanism. So Bob has reviewed the $27,983,000. You have a good overview of that, and you can see the context of that within the last 4 years. You see the 14, 15, 16, and the proposed fiscal year 17. The period is July of 2016 through June of 2017. What we have in terms of the state aid that's not related to the education fund. So we spoke briefly about the special education revenue of $2,237,000. You know, a very significant amount of revenue that we received, along with the numbers that you see at the top of the page. Transportation aid. There's some tuition income. I'm looking at page 38. We have tuition income, you see, listed sort of in the middle of the page. Bob mentioned the Career Center tuition, $249,000. There's the out-of-state tuition, and then there's various other types of state aid that are associated with either operating the Career Center or reimbursing the district for special ed services. And that is what you see on line 10 here on this page 39. And when I say line 10, on the very far left border of page 39 is a series of reference numbers. And you see this number that says offsetting revenues, 8,601,000. Okay? So what we do is we take our proposed budget and it's reduced by those sources of revenues that are not needed from the education fund. And the difference is what is called education spending. And that's, if you looked it up in the statutes, that's a term that's, that the legislature has defined just like that. Spending minus these revenue sources equals education spending. That number is 19,381, and we divide that number by the equalized student count. And as Bob has said, that's such an important number when it comes to calculating a tax rate, because that number of 17,349 there, it's on page on line 13 there, same page 39, 17,349. It is that 19,381 divided by 1,117 equalized students. In this year, effective July 1 of 2015, the legislature had given Brattleboro Union High School a number. That's on line 22. 17,354. As of July, the statute said if we exceed that, there would be a penalty, a tax penalty. You see that we don't exceed that. We are close to that number, but it is less. And because of that, because it's less, we don't trigger any tax penalty. And now we're just about done with the funding calculation. It's that number of our number, 17,349, is compared to a index that the legislature announced. That's on line 25. There's a very small number there. If you had your magnifying glasses on, you would see 9,870. And the tax rate is based on our number of 17,349 divided by that number, and that is a 1.7578 ratio. That's our tax rate for the Union High School. That's on line 26. Now, because we are grades 7 through 12 as the middle school, high school, and the career center, and we represent 5 towns, that tax rate gets weighted across the other 5 towns, so that when the bill comes to the taxpayer from the town office, it's a pre-K through 12, all of our kids, not just the high school. Because as you I'm sure remember, when you pay your tax bill, you generally are paying one tax rate. So that's what the statistics down there on below line 26 illustrate. So, for example, Brattleboro Town School District has 46, so in the parentheses on the very far right, 46% of the students at BUHS. So they're going to get 46% of the $1.75 tax rate. And then Brattleboro Town will look at the same calculation when they look at the pre-K through 6 budget. They'll do the same calculations. How much did we spend? What is our revenue? How many kids do we have? What is our cost per student calculated against this 9,870? And they'll have a tax rate. Just as an aside, that tax rate is $1.54, and the proportional share of that is combined, and then we have a total tax rate. I was giving you an illustration of Brattleboro Town, so I'll just kind of complete the thought on that. When you take Brattleboro Union and Brattleboro Town, you combine the weighted average, the tax rate is estimated to be down 4.9%, or we're paying right now $1.67 for school property taxes. That's our tax rate. This is the CLA adjusted rate, and we're projecting, based on what we know now, going from $1.67 down to $1.59, down 4.9%. So that's a pretty favorable impact. The high school, as you see, is a very level funded budget. And when you look at just the high school tax rate, you see that this tax rate is also down. I'm going back to line 26, and I'm comparing fiscal year 2016, $1.79, you see, to the $1.75. See, that's also down. So the board's review of spending and the proposals has resulted in a reasonably favorable financial impact on the school tax rate. Here's an overview.
Everybody got that? 100%? It is complicated, no question about it. But at the end of the day, we made it under the requirement to avoid penalties, which is a big plus. Ron, anything you'd like to?
Well, I was just going through my previous budget drafts, and you know, what you've already said is true, that you know, the principals really work very closely with Frank and I in looking at maintaining programs, excellent programs that we've had, and expanding some of them. But in some cases, when we look at the student-to-teacher ratio, we just couldn't justify some of the positions that we have. We initially looked at our administrative staff and felt like we couldn't justify the numbers that we have. So that was a hard decision to make, but at the high school, I thought it made sense. And then with the Career Center, we worked really closely with Michael in looking at the class numbers, and some classes that only had 4 or 5 students in them really needed to be reduced. And we hope that those numbers can come back. We're not eliminating any programs, but I think we're feeling like we need higher numbers in certain sections to justify the staff. And I think that's what we went through for all of the positions. I know an English position that was left vacant, we decided that we would reduce that. An art position was reduced. That'll be taken care of through a retirement. Foreign language at the middle school, a percentage of a position of 0.25%. We felt like we had to reduce that. Academic support position reduced in BAMS. So those are the tough decisions. But when we look at the overall numbers and being able to service students in classes, we feel that we can do that in a very, very good way and maintain the excellent programs that we have.
Okay. Got a very carefully listening audience out there. Comments, questions that we can try to clear up?
Frank, I have a question. On your explanation of the Brattleboro town on line 26, you said how, I'm missing something. You said it was 46.69%.
Yep.
And I don't understand how all these percentages are arrived, because they don't equal 100, so I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know how it works.
Good question, yeah. Yeah, and then it begins to help people understand that there's a real disconnect between the cash flow that's generated from school tax rates and the cash flow that a school needs to operate. So that's your observation of the fact that those numbers you know, don't add up to 100 is like the beginning of, well, how does this thing work? And so it's a good question. And the answer is you would need the whole system in front of you to see how all the parts fit together. But to illustrate Brattleboro Town, if we went to the Brattleboro Town tax calculation document, which is in the Brattleboro Town report, you would see a number that does add up to 100% if you took their proportional enrollment of 53% and this number of 46%, you know, with the rounding, it's going to add up to 100%. And the calculation really is this 46 times 1.75 equals 82 cents. Okay, and then on their side, it's their 53% of their number of $1.54 is going to equal their share of the tax rate on that side, which is going to be about 80 cents. And then those numbers add up to what you'll see in the mailbox when you open up the tax bill. But what it helps, your question, what it helps folks understand is that these tax rates are applied against a unique grand list in each town, and it will raise a certain amount of money. That money doesn't go to the school, it goes to the education fund. The education fund then looks at this budget proposal and they say, well, how much does Brattleboro Union High School need in terms of a check? Where you see that in this document, I didn't get into quite that level of detail, is back to the revenue numbers. We have on page 38 the total revenues. Okay, 27,983,000. We need enough cash flow to spend 27,983,000, right? Page 37 is where the revenue data starts, and at the bottom of page 37 is the state education support money. That's 18,409,000. That's the result of what we get from these tax calculations, but there is no straight line to, like it used to be in the old days, where the school board showed up to town meeting and said, we need X. You look at your grand list and you divide your grand list by X, and there's a tax rate and there's a straight line cash flow. You can see there is no calculation that you can do that says grand list times tax rate gets back to the cash flow that you would expect from the state office. Folks that sit in the lister's office make the connections. They see that. The select board we get a copy of a document that's generated between the tax department, the agency of education, that goes to the select board and the town treasurers that do make the connections. It shows the grand list raised X based on these tax rates. The school asked for Y, and out of the total appropriation, this is the amount that went to Montpelier, and this is how much Montpelier sent back. In general, our resident tax rates are not raising enough for our local that check we need. But with the second homeowner, non-resident revenue, you know, the system is working statewide. Some towns are appropriating and paying into the education fund a lot more than they're spending. Others are spending more than they appropriate, and that was the whole purpose of Act 60, is to equalize educational opportunity regardless of how big your grand list is. So probably went a little wide on the answer, but it is all connected, and you kind of got to get into that to explain it.
Thank you.
Questions, comments? It's really great to see a reasonable sized crowd. I have to say that in recent years it's been a little bit on the paltry side for this particular meeting. Fortunately, we have BCTV here to record it, so there are hopefully some folks at home watching it. Yes, Kevin.
So, just to get an idea how the budget works and stuff, I walked into my classroom this morning and there was a roof leak puddle on the floor. And Robert Clark knows of the issue. And I imagine that the repair for that would show up somewhere in this budget, if it's in the ceiling needs repair?
Well, in general, it would show up in the operations and maintenance. There's a adequate line there for things like that don't require a big capital project. You know, we have a certain amount that we try to allocate for floors and roofs and floors. There's a huge number of acres of both roof and floors in here. And if you look at the capital program, you'll see almost every year there's something in there for flooring. Well, with all that flooring and all the number of people that are passing around on it, we have to do a little bit of that every year. The roof is a huge issue. As you know, I'm sure we just completed the auditorium roof, which was a pretty big project from last year. But I don't know the number of acres, but I've heard it before of roof on this place, but it's measured in acres.
It is.
Yeah. So comparing that to your roof in your house, it's a lot. But that, yeah, it would be in here somewhere under that operations and maintenance line.
It looks like there's like $560,000. So you got to get your dibs in for that roof, that leak.
All right, thank you.
And we recycle the water as well that comes through the roof. Yes, sir.
I'd like to clean my chalkboard.
Yeah, right. Yes, sir.
Brief comment?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Kurt Johnson. I teach foreign language at the middle school. I just wanted to briefly recall and underscore some of the things that were said last week at the last meeting, simply because it seemed to be somewhat well received by members of the board as far as we could read that. I'm here with my colleague Karen Sebastian, who is the head of the Modern Classical Languages Department at the high school. And just quickly, what we'd like to say is we understand difficult decisions have been made, but to recall and underscore the argument made, the .25 position that is poised to be cut really represents a lot of benefit for the money. I think they gave you a figure of $12,000. History shows that once these cuts are made, they simply don't come back. We estimate that as many as 100 students would have to find other things to be educated upon at that time. And I speak to you not just as a teacher, but also as a parent of 3 children who over the next 10 years are going to be graduating from the school system. And who is in contact with other parents who, some of them like me, moved to the area several years ago and were amazed and delighted to find a school system that had such benefits as a flourishing and robust foreign language department. My children, for example, right now are taking Spanish at the elementary school level, and I, like many parents, would like to see them without any kind of interruption be able to continue all the way to senior year. So just quickly, I wanted to sort of recall, especially in the light of what is new information on the budgeting process. Karen and myself are also going to be leaving a letter with you later today. So just thank you, and just would like to ask you if the board could find some way to secure the extra funding. And we want to thank you for our continued support of both the foreign language departments, 1 through 12, and the exchange programs. And finally, I would say the budget vote is going to be on Mardi Gras, which traditionally, if nothing else, is a celebration of abundance. And I would say there's an abundance of benefit to be had for that $12,000 in terms of what it would give back. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And there is a, and I'm remiss, Maggie Cassidy provided me with a handout that I meant to bring. That's why I was just searching through all my folders tonight, but that will be available at the annual meeting for folks to pick up and take a look at there's a copy of it right here if anybody wants to see it right now. But I did say that I would bring it to this meeting, and with all the folders that are in my briefcase, that one didn't make it. Yeah, we have it. So. Okay. Thanks for your input. Any other comments, questions? Okay, well, we will move on to a very abbreviated regular meeting. And the first item under that is the approval of the minutes of January 25th. Is there a motion accordingly? We don't have them.
Yeah, it says to be distributed, but I don't think they've been distributed as of yet.
Okay. That's right, they haven't been, or I always see these ahead of time, so I just kind of assume once I've seen them they're in, you know, written in stone. Any communications? Anything else for the clerk's report? Okay, groups of visitors, we've taken that as part of the budget discussion. So we'll have consent agenda next. Is there a motion accordingly?
I move we enter consent agenda.
Okay. Second. You get that by Sean? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, we are on consent agenda, and we will hear a report of the Finance Committee.
Finance Committee met on Thursday, January 28th at 8 a.m. and we approved warrant numbers 1116, 1118, 1120, 1121, 1122, 1124, and 1125, and a total amount of $146,949.44. We also approved payrolls of January 8th in the amount of $425,998.78, and January 22nd in the amount of $426,975.79. We also reviewed the year-to-date budget, and did we have any other big business?
Well, we
That's all I have.
you said year-to-date results to the
Yeah.
current budget, yes.
Yes.
And as always, spend some time on the budget we're working on, trying to make sure we understand it as best possible. Okay?
And I presume we are not meeting this Thursday morning.
That's correct. And we'll have our next Finance Committee meeting sometime after the annual meeting.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Is there anything else for consent agenda? If not, all in favor of approving consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, consent agenda is passed. We do not have our regular round of administrative reports tonight since we had them last week, but I believe we have a brief report from Student Council. Is that?
Sure. I didn't know I was the only one, but we haven't done a whole lot since the semester started, but we participated in a Marlboro College students graduate study, a woman named Felicity Ratt, about positive planning and group dynamics around activities. She went around to local small groups like ours who are involved in decision making, leadership, and examined qualities and strategies that helped groups function better. So that was fun to do. We're also trying to plan more administrative lunches and be more in touch with the administration in general. It's a little hard to get everybody together when the midst of finals, but moving to the second semester should be a little easier. So, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Is there other administrative reports that are, anything great happens? Well, I'm sure everything great happened since last week, but nothing spectacular and new. Okay, well, we'll dismiss with that since we just heard them last week. Is there any other unfinished business? If not, we have one item of new business, and that would be assigning the motions for
For the meeting next week.
next week's meeting, yes. And
So I can tell you who did the motions from the past, if they want to continue to do that. Article 1, to move the reports of the district officers be accepted as printed. Ruth has done that in the past.
What? I think I can manage it again.
Okay.
Article 2, I've always nominated Tim Arsenal as moderator, so I can continue that. Looks like Mike Collier might have done something with that. So
Yeah, I think it was when Tim was it his 15th year, 30th year?
Something like that.
It was an anniversary. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think you let me do it because he was
Oh.
from Vernon and I was from Vernon.
well, we'll see if we need to double team that again. Article 4, to nominate the treasurer. If anybody would like to do that. Russ?
Oh, we skipped 3.
You skipped 3? Oh, sorry, the clerk? Yep. To nominate the clerk.
Who did that?
She's no longer on the board.
Oh, no.
I can do it.
Vicky will take on that
Great.
responsibility.
So then the treasurer would be Russ. And then
You
nomination,
mean I'd be the treasurer.
no, you're nominating the
Good.
treasurer.
That's,
Got it?
that's good. Just want to be clear on that.
You're the economics guy. Yeah. We need to nominate the auditor.
Who's,
Pat, would you like to do that?
Pat, how about
Excellent.
Pat in the picture?
And then the all-important vouchers to pay the officers. We always do like an hourly breakdown for that.
Yes, we do.
John, would you like to do that?
That's good, yeah, Sean.
Good, good.
And
And then the big
who's gonna
motion,
do Article 7?
I would recommend that the chair do that.
Oh, okay.
And then it's just other business as needed.
Okay. You notice it's actually shorter, slightly shorter number of articles because there were a couple in there that we've done in the past that are all part of statute that really we didn't need to be including because they had to be done. One was accepting or categorical grants, and that one which we do anyway. So okay, we will have those printed up as is always the case, and I would I really appreciate people that took the time to come out and listen tonight and make comments, and hopefully you'll talk it up with your friends and neighbors to come to the BUHS gymnasium for a rollicking good time on February 9th.
7 p.m.?
7 p.m.
7 p.m., yeah. Is there any other business to come before the group? If not,
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
I second it.
to call your seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? We're adjourned, we stand adjourned. Thank you all very much.